Hello everyone, thank you for coming and listening to this talk. So the patterns of relative champagne cost within the same producer time series and cross-sectional analysis of the cost of entry-level, mid-range, and premium champagne. So this is, by the way, a dream of mine. I've had this in my mind for over a decade, and it's only in the past 4 or 5 months that it started to materialize in the real world. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here and talking about this very first step in this project. So, what has happened to the price of champagne over the past 65 years? And by that, I mean the real price. What does it take to walk into a store in New York City, in Manhattan, and walk out with a bottle of champagne? And how do we measure the value of a bottle of champagne in 1948 compared to the value of a bottle of champagne in 2015? I selected and decided upon how many hours of work are required in order to walk in and get a bottle of champagne in New York City. Why? Why did I do this? Because it's a consistent price. We all understand what an hour of work is. It's a unit of measurement most humans for the past hundreds, if not thousands of years have been able to figure out. It's something that doesn't change. It is a fair comparison across time, space, and economic position. We can all understand what that means. So what is this? Whoops. So we went beyond, this is going beyond the normal price and real price analysis. The hours of work required to purchase an entry-level bottle, it's a non-vintage bottle of champagne, a mid-range bottle of champagne, which is a vintage, and a premium vintage, the prestige bottle, the top of the line from a champagne house. These are the 3 categories I looked at. So, first, these are all bottles of champagne coming from the Champagne region of France. It's the only region in the world that can produce champagne. So why is this important? Because champagne, because it can only come from the Champagne region of France, it is completely regulated by one and only one entity, the CIVC. That means they regulate the raw materials, the grapes that go into it, the marketing of it, what it can be called, where it can come from, labeling of all the bottles, everything that goes on about it. So this means champagne offers us an opportunity of viewing the economic landscape through the lens of a single, constant luxury category that also has differentiated products within it. Luxury product of champagne, the 3 products within it: non-vintage, vintage, and the premium, tête à cuvée or prestige champagne. So a bottle of entry-level non-vintage champagne in principle is the same today, 2015, 2017, as it was in 1948. It's changed perhaps a little bit from year to year, but we don't, as consumers, do not really notice that. That's the whole purpose of it. So why is this important? Because of this highly regulated CIVC, it keeps a consistency. This is the consistency that we're really looking for over long periods of time. And champagne is among the very few products that I've been able to think of that's not changed very much over the past 65 years and still retains a similar value place where it did 65, 75, or even a bit more than that it does today. As I said, we have 3 tiers of bottles. So in 2016, 74% of all the bottles that were sent to the US were non-vintage, the entry-level bottle. In 2016, just over 1.5% was, 1.3% was sent to the US, which is the mid-range, the vintage, and 5.5% of the bottles were the top-of-the-line prestige wines that were sent were the top cuvées. So even within the top-of-the-line category, where we try to keep the champagne as consistent as possible, there will be some vintage variation. Some vintages will be better than other vintages, and sometimes there won't be any vintages at all because they're not good enough. This all comes down to that top, highest quality is going to have changed, whether it's an equally good year or if they don't make it at all. each time that it is made, it's not going to be identically the same. That's the category and the purpose of the non-vintage. So that means that the changes are minimized in every non-vintage wine through blending the different years together, and all of the real change really comes on the side end, the higher end, which is the premium side. So I looked at 3 brands: Bollinger, Moet Chandon, and Louis Roederer. And these are the different types of wines that I looked at. The entry-level non-vintage, it can have several different names. It can go through different product cycles in the U.S. But these are all the entry-level. There's some similar mid-range. They sometimes have different names, different branding, different titling of it. And then the Prestige Cuvée is most recognizable, which would be Moet Chandon's Dom Perignon, Bollinger's Recently Disgorged, and Louis Roederer's Cristal. So, where did I actually get my bottle prices from? I got them from Sherry Lehman catalogs. Now, this is a business that has been operated and consistently since the repeal of Prohibition in 1933. So, in New York City, its neighborhood has not changed. One store in New York, and they have not moved. They've moved a couple of times, but they've not moved within the same area. So having a data source that has not moved, if they require the same things that they face are consistent. And most importantly, that they have beautiful, absolutely stunning catalogs. These price catalogs are a treasure trove. They're incredible. And they also have certain standards. So the customers that shop at this store, they demand that if you say you have something in stock, they have to be able to deliver it. There's no, oh, I'm sorry, we just ran out of that. It's a fire sale. So whatever they say that they have, they actually do have it. That means these prices are real. They're not just pulled out of the air. Oh, I got this on a closeout, one case only. That's not what this is about. And I highly encourage everyone to come to tomorrow's talk, 3A, and listen to Amy's talk from UC Davis, who supplied a lot of these catalogs for me, which I am completely indebted and so thrilled that she had them. Oops. So, how are we going to convert the currency that I found in the catalogs from 1948 to how do I compare that to 2015? So, the way that this is done, how do we convert it? We convert it to a very fundamental index. And this is what an incredible fun innovation by applying a more precise conversion method than simply applying historical prices and inflating it via CPI. So, the relative price of champagne between 48 and 2015. An hour of work. An hour of work in 1948 is the same as punching in for an hour of work of 2015. I'm only able to work X amount of hours a day. As much as I'd love to work 25 hours a day, it is not possible. Theory of relativity aside. So, who are the people that we're talking about who are going into the store in Sherry Lehman to buy a bottle of champagne? So there's a range of people. It's not just one. There's 5 income groups representing the income limits of the 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and the top 5, and the bottom, the lower limit of the top 5% of U.S. family income distributions. So we're talking about New Yorkers who live in New York City and work in New York City and pay taxes in New York City. So, calculating the price of the champagne in terms of the work hours. So let's take a quick look at the process for calculating the price of champagne in terms of work hours. We're going to be doing this by looking at the number of hours they work is going to be equal to the price of the wine in the catalog, looking at the sales tax in that catalog, which would be a combination of both the city sales tax and the state sales tax, and dividing that by their disposable income and the number of annual hours they work. So why are we going to be using disposable income? Because the disposable income, the real disposable income is what matters to people. Because whatever I have in my pocket at the end of the day, that's what it matters. So as I said, all of this process is how I went through to calculate these taxes will all be in all of my slides that I post. So it is not always, so it's just a shot that you can see that I had to go through it to find out what some of these catalogs were from. And so let's get to the real quick part, the real important part of this, which is what are some of the observations that I made from this first step of analysis. So the first observation that over time people work fewer hours regardless of their income group for an entry level bottle of champagne from any of the producers. By that I mean everybody works fewer hours in 2015 than they do in 1948. This is assuming that we are including all of the taxes, so state, city, federal, and also Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security taxes are included as well in this analysis. Observation number 2. So the premium champagne of all 3 brands and all income groups, it became more expensive and I had to work more hours in order to get the highest level, the highest premium brand of champagne. So the exception of that being the 5th income group, and in the case that they buy Dom Perignon became slightly less expensive to the 5th income group only. Third observation is that for all income groups, all 3 levels of the quality of the champagne, all three brands are certainly still around, and so there was not a outlier of one champagne brand it became really inexpensive because it was going out of business. All of these are still can be purchased at the same store today. So, and these are my final key observations, that all of the income groups, as I said, for the entry-level bottle becomes much more affordable for everybody having to work fewer hours today than they did in the past. And in general, the premium products required more hours of income, more hours of work in 2015 compared to 1948. And this is what I've come up with, and I'm so excited to continue. This is just the first step. Thank you very much.